Charlo pay-per-view numbers, Bud Crawford thinking about leaving Top Rank to sign with Al Heyman. Well, the fact that some fans believe that Mikey Garcia would be an easier fight for Manny than Conor McGregor. Boy, that's going to be a good one. Next potential opponents for Jamal and Jermell Charlo. And also, well, Mayweather possibly being in the corner of Deontay Wilder for the trilogy fight. What would you like to discuss first, my friend?
Let's piggyback off of last week's action. So talk about the pay-per-view numbers as well as future opponents for the Charlos.
Very good. Guys, it was just announced that initial projections, initial numbers are in, and they're pretty much what we thought they were going to be. It looks like, according to several sources, that pay-per-view purchases were around 100,000. Now they're hoping when everything is completely tabulated from all the cable providers and satellite distributors as well as these direct streaming purchases that it'll reach closer to 120,000, but I wouldn't bet on it. What does this tell you about not only both fighters but the Showtime platform? Or could it have been that it was just too much competition surrounding it? Because when you look at the UFC 253, boy, that was a big hit. That actually scored 700,000 purchases in comparison.
Yeah, I don't think UFC had a lot to do with this card. And, we talked about this, Joseph, earlier, and we talked about, you asked me if this is a quote-unquote premium, or these premium fights. And I said yes and no. They're premium matchups in terms of competitiveness, in terms of interest, but these aren't premium fights as far as the casual fan. So the Charlo brothers, not well known, not well admired among casual fans. Their opponents, certainly not. So therefore, you don't have a lot of interest. There wasn't a lot of competition that night. Boxing versus UFC, because you had their middleweight champion, a guy who I think is sort of their Lomachenko, a superstar, and in boxing you had two relevant fights, good matchups, but these guys aren't superstars. So it wasn't an apples to apples comparison for those who say UFC won the night. Well, it wasn't really apples to apples. We also talked about the price, and again, we're used to seeing this on Showtime, Joseph, and this being on free Showtime, and this being $74 or $79. Yeah, fans aren't used to that. Boxing fans, fights like these are usually on Showtime or HBO. Cards like this. So, hey, with the downturn in the economy, it's no surprising that they may have maxed out at 100,000 or 120,000 pay-per-view buys.
Well, it was just announced, right, that Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz, originally scheduled for October 24th, has been rescheduled and moved from L.A. to San Antonio, Texas, in the world-renowned Alamo Dome, the house that Canelo built, so to speak. Or you could say the house that Pernell Whitaker and Chavez Sr. built back in the day. And one of the reasons for the switch, and I thought this was a brilliant move, is, they wanted live gate. Governor Abbott of Texas has opened, and obviously we've seen Cowboy games in which they've allowed fans up to 25 to 30% capacity. So we're looking at possibly, tickets go on sale, by the way, this Monday morning coming up, right? And you're looking at a possible arena configuration of 15,000 potential fans. I think with a pay-per-view event as well as a event this big, I think it's going to easily sell out in San Antonio. San Antonio's always been a boxing city. But do you think the numbers, the disappointing numbers for the Charlo pay-per-view had anything to do with the date switch?
No, I don't. again, I mean, from day one, we thought that, especially like the Charlo versus Derevyanchenko, we thought, hey, this is a heck of a fight, heck of a matchup. But from day one, we knew that this wouldn't be a big attraction, given that it's on pay-per-view, and given that these are not marquee names. So, no, it's not surprising at all to me.
Yeah, initially, and it was reported by several boxing writers, boxing reporters, that the switch was done because a UFC, coincidentally, was scheduled on the original date, October 24th, UFC 254. I think that was just a coincidence, and I'm in agreement with you, Lee. Now, when you look at the Charlos, obviously they scored a big hit, but it's a damn shame. No mainstream or casual fans witnessed this event. And to be honest with you, Lee, I have a bone to pick. Yeah, of course. And, Lee, to be honest with you, I have a bone to pick with the boxing diehards. This is just proof positive to what I've been saying, that the great majority of these guys stream these events illegally. And you're going to see greater involvement with Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz from the casual and mainstream audience. You're going to see much better numbers. I project that it's going to get at least 275,000 to 325,000. That's my guess. Because Gervonta he's got a healthy mainstream following for his young career, considering he's such a young fighter, considering that it's only a 130-pound fight. Yeah, I think it's going to do much better. We'll see how the replay does this Saturday night, but I'm still not expecting a huge audience. Lee, what does this say about the future of the Charlo brothers? Do they need, in order to be thrust on the pay-per-view platform once again, are they going to need a more, commercially viable dance partner, or will we see them on regular Showtime or Fox next time they fight?
Well, regardless, they definitely need something. Preferably a commercially viable dance partner, someone like Canelo or Triple G. Definitely. If not that, then they need something else. They need something else to put them over that hump, because right now, yeah, they look good on paper, and they're talented fighters, elite level guys. But right now, they're not sticky as far as the public. They're just not in mainstream consciousness. They're not, and they're not the Tyson Furies or the Canelo Alvarez or the Lomachenko's or even the Broners or the Mayweathers. So right, they need something. They need something to thrust them back into, thrust them into mainstream contention, because the mainstream right now doesn't care.
Well, the last time something like this happened, right, and we were bringing this up before this event even took place, that this scenario reminded me of how HBO was treating Top Rank Inc. and Terrence Crawford before Top Rank decided to jump ship and sign a lucrative long-term deal with ESPN, in which HBO and Peter Nelson refused to pay for Terrence Crawford versus Victor Postal, which should have been a regular HBO championship boxing episode. Instead, they insisted that, they have the added revenue stream, and they weren't going to guarantee that purse without it. Well, that just happened with the Charlo twins, and we braced everyone for it. And do you think Heyman is trying to get as much money as he possibly can because he sees the end of the road ahead? Do you think Heyman is preparing for the demise and the eventual exit of Showtime Sports from the arena of boxing? And do you think he's going to plan on, now if Golden Boy doesn't get their act in gear and, repair their somewhat tumultuous relationship with both Canelo and DAZN, do you think Heyman might actually switch to the DAZN platform if Showtime goes under? Do you think he might be already planning for this?
Yeah, I think he's been preparing for a long time. As far as Showtime going under, he's been preparing this. He's probably going to try to cash out get as much cash, squeeze as much cash as he can. Is the money going to be there? I don't know. Joseph, the problem is, I guess the issue is, with HBO and Showtime, boxing needs them more than those networks now need boxing. You know, the things have changed. So back in the day, especially in the 80s and the 90s, even in the early 2000s, HBO needed those big fights. They needed those big fighters because they attracted people like your dad and my dad. You know, they had subscriptions just to see the boxing. But now the landscape has totally changed. Now, hey, it would be great to have a guy on HBO or Showtime. Boxing definitely needs them, but they no longer need boxing, you know, because as you mentioned on a previous show, the Game of Thrones and shows like that, those are big-time hits for HBO. And the fact that people are getting apps now, they're doing away with HBO and Showtime. They're getting Netflix. So HBO and Showtime don't have nearly as much pull or as much weight or as much influence as they used to. So, yeah, the demise of HBO and Showtime as far as boxing, it's been a long time coming. And it's inevitable with Showtime. It's just a matter of when.
This is why I brought up the DAZN platform, right? Because this is what Eddie Hearn just posted on his Twitter account, right? He said, quote, "The fight to make is Demetrius Andrade versus Jermall Charlo. I saw Charlo last night saying he wants to unify like his brother. Easy fight to be made, to be honest with you. He's a world champion ready to unify. So Andrade versus Charlo, yes, please," end quote. Do you think that Eddie Hearn and Al Heyman have already contacted each other regarding this potential unification on the DAZN platform?
That sounds, as a fan, it sounds like a great idea. Again, neither of these guys, both of these guys are well known and well respected among the hardcore enthusiasts. Neither of these guys are mainstream, but it would be a good, a solid fight for DAZN, but it's not gonna, you're not gonna rack up a whole lot of numbers. It's certainly not Canelo level, but to me, I think that's a heck of a matchup, and maybe the winner of that fight gets elevated to semi-mainstream status.
Agreed. I think, and once again, we talked about this on previous shows, it's Promotions 101. If you've got guys who aren't ticket sellers but elite-level fighters, you have no choice but to stick them in tough. Right. And that would be the next logical step for both Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo. It's Fisher Cup bait for both these guys, right? The problem is this,
Joseph. If you're the manager of those guys, you don't want that. If you're Andrade or Charlo's manager, you want to get that big, you want that big cookie with Canelo or that big cookie with Triple G as soon as possible. But it just may not happen that way for the reasons you've expressed. But those guys, if you're managing those two guys, you definitely want to bypass each other and go straight to Triple G or Canelo.
Well, Lee, there's a saying, people in hell want a bucket of ice water, but it's just not going to happen. Exactly. Unfortunately, these guys are going to have to increase their market value before they get that big shot at the brass ring, right, against the biggest star of boxing. And to be honest with you, with all of the legal issues that Canelo is currently going through, I don't see him being available anytime soon. So what do you do in the interim? Triple G looks like he's already slated, and it should be announced very soon. He's going to be fighting Zarameta by the end of the year. So if they want to, fight someone in the interim, why not a unification bout? But here's the problem, Lee, and this is one of the reasons why this is a hard fight to make. For the reasons that you just stated, both guys, because it's such a dangerous fight, tough fight for both men. Both men are going to want to be handsomely compensated. Is DAZN going to be willing? And once again, you said this is not going to move the needle for any mainstream and casual audiences. Are they going to want to pay? I'm guessing an estimated $4 to $5 million for this fight.
That's a tough one. You'd have to be on the inside to really, to figure out the pros and cons and pluses and negatives. It is a hot fight, and that fight would be hotter than Charlo versus Derevyanchenko, especially now that Charlo beat Derevyanchenko. But so you'll get a little uptick. How much? I don't know. I mean, is DAZN willing to lose a little bit of money, lose a little bit, to invest? Hey, we'll take a hit on this one, but we're going to build the winner of this fight to be this, a great challenger to Triple G or to Canelo. A lot of the fans, Charlo, both of the Charlos, but again, it's and they're good fighters, and they deserve to be in the ring with Canelo and Triple G as skill-wise. But it's like Leonard versus Hearns, right? Leonard's like, I'm not going to fight you. No one knows who the hell you are, except for boxing fans. I'm a mainstream star. I'm going to go over here and fight this guy Duran, who's also a mainstream star. So then Leonard had the two fights with Duran, and by then, Hearns had become a big name, and then Leonard was like, okay, now I'll fight you because you bring something to the table. Before, you were hell of an opponent, a huge risk, but you didn't bring anything to the table. So if for Canelo to take that risk, or Golovkin to take that risk, someone's got to bring something to the table,
Exactly.
And
that's why
like
this fight makes
Kovalev
sense.
brought something
Absolutely.
to the table,
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully the winner of this, if these guys get together, the winner will get elevated and he'll bring a little something to the table.
Indeed. And once again, the days, and it's pretty obvious now, the days of the, blank checkbook given to promoters, boy, that's long gone. Now, obviously, Heyman has always, preferred to keep things in-house, which he wouldn't be doing in this case. He would be working in a co-promotion with Matchroom Sport. If you had to guess, Cleveland, at 160 pounds, who does Jermall fight next? Whitter's next two fights? If you had to look at all of the available opponents at 160.
Wow, next two fights. I think Andrade would be good. Obviously, that would be maybe too much risk for the reward. But like you said, you might be pushed into that position. Looking at these middleweights, there's not a lot out there. I mean, you don't want to stick them in. I don't know what that got Murata perhaps from Japan. Maybe you get a little boost
Murata.
there.
Yeah.
Maybe
he's
him being a
WBA
Japanese
regular champion, isn't he?
Correct. Maybe he's a little boost, but Eubank Jr. possibly.
Let me tell you what's going to happen, Cleveland. Let me tell you what's going to happen, brother. Let me look into my crystal ball, and I'll tell you. Heyman is going to try to keep everything in-house and keep Jermall in his winning ways until Canelo gets free and clear. Either gets out of Golden Boy's contract, his contract with Golden Boy, or resolves his issues with Golden Boy and DAZN and gets back in action. So his next two opponents, guys, next he's going to be fighting possibly by the end of the year. Chris Eubank Jr. for the WBA regular title? Does Murata actually have the WBA title, or does he have the regular title? I know Chris Eubank won the interim title with that terrible, when Matt Korobov got hurt, right? It was only like a round or something.
Right. No, yeah.
He was rewarded the interim WBA title?
Right. So Murata's under Canelo. I think Canelo still has the super WBA.
Okay, very good. That's right. The WBA has 3 fights. So, yeah, they're going to try and give Jermall another small trinket with a fight with Chris Eubank Jr., and that's going to be a really entertaining fight. And then after that, they're going to have him fight Jared Hurd in a matchup that everyone wanted to see at 154 pounds. That's going to be his next two fights, brother.
Right.
Heyman loves to keep everything in-house and doesn't want to make – he doesn't, unless he absolutely has to, doesn't want to make inter-promotional matchups.
Right. Because it's a lot easier and he keeps more of the money that way.
Well, yeah, of course. He gets a piece of both fighters' purses.
Right.
Right?
And
just like Don King, he keeps everything in-house. Absolutely.
Yep. And then the negotiations flow because you're making all the decisions.
That's right.
You don't have to negotiate with another promoter. You just,
So that's what's going to happen, Lee. So when you look at Jermell Charlo at 154 pounds, that's a different story entirely. In my opinion, Jermell versus Sergey Derevyanchenko at 154 pounds sometime in 2021 is a great matchup, but who does he fight in the interim? Obviously, Derevyanchenko wants a, feeling out fight in his first fight at junior middleweight. So in the interim, let me pull out my crystal ball. He is going to take on Tim Tszyu in possibly Australia. What do you think about that, Cleveland?
That's an interesting fight. That would be huge. I mean, given that Charlo is the Ring Magazine champion, and Tszyu's coming off this hot win. That makes a lot of sense. I could see that happening, and that would give him a little bit more buzz, at least in Australia.
Well, it's a lot better than the buzz he's currently getting with only 100,000 pay-per-view buys, man. But I tell you what, it's going to be interesting. But right now, like I stated on this past Wednesday night show, guys, Jermall and Jermell are both the toast of the boxing nation at 154 and 160 pounds. Congratulations to them. And, so we'll see what happens. We'll see how it plays out. But, guys, we still have so much more to cover. And about 30 minutes left on the show. My goodness, how time flies. So we're going to talk about this, Cleveland. Rumored that Bud Crawford is thinking about leaving Top Rank and signing with Al Heyman and PBC per advice from Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, once again, this was reported by Mike Coppinger of The Athletic, and this is what spurred all of this, right? Now, obviously, Floyd has bad blood with Mr. Bob Arum and didn't even want to make the Manny Pacquiao fight because of his affiliation with the top-ranked CEO, right? So this is what Floyd Mayweather Jr. recently had to say about Terrence Crawford in an interview with NFL's Shannon Sharp. He said this about Terrence Crawford being ranked below Lomachenko on most critics' pound-for-pound list. Quote, I look at guys like Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford can be a lot bigger than he is right now. This shows that racism still exists. How can you say that Lomachenko is better than Terrence Crawford? Not at all, in my opinion. Not in a million years. End quote. You know that he's been in the ear, and what I want to know is what does he have to gain from this? Apparently, it's been rumored that he's been in the ear of Terrence Crawford, urging him to leave Top Rank and Bob Arum, claiming that it's the only way to get that fight made with Errol Spence Jr. Now, I can't divulge which fighter told me this, but it's a PBC fighter, or at least one when he was actively participating in the sport of boxing. Now he's a commentator, I'll give you that hint. And he once told me, he said, look, Heyman is a man of his word, but he will say things to try and hook you into signing with him, basically saying things like, look, I can't guarantee that I can get you this fight with Errol Spence Jr., but I will guarantee that you will never get that fight unless you sign with us. He told me that that's the way he operates. That's how he actually hooked Manny Pacquiao into signing an advisory deal with him, as well as Amir Khan, as well as the gentleman that I'm talking about, right? So do you think that's what was said to Terrence Crawford? I can almost guarantee that he did say that. And do you think it's a wise move at this juncture of his career?
I don't think so. But I would have said no to Floyd Mayweather as well. So it worked out for Floyd, but it doesn't mean it'll work out for everyone. I think they're doing great. And as far as fighting Errol Spence, if the public wants it, it's going to happen, period. The public wants it, it's going to happen. There'll be no problem with Spence versus Crawford if the public wants it. So, if he's worried about that, then he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be worried about that at all. Right now, Top Rank is doing a great job with him. They're the big contract with ESPN. They've keeping him active. We with Al Heyman, we've had a problem with these fighters sort of going to sleep, like Danny Garcia. Once every 8 or 9 months fighting, and they're out of public consciousness. You don't want that to happen. You want to keep these fights. You want to keep these TV dates. Keep showcasing these fighters. I think right now Top Rank is better equipped to do that. Maybe 7 out of 10 times or 8 out of 10 times. So I would stay with them.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think he's going to stay with Top Rank Inc. But I think he's going to do exactly what Tim Bradley decided to do. When Tim Bradley's contract was up at the tail end of his career, everyone was urging him to jump ship. And keep in mind, Tim Bradley's manager is Terrence Crawford's manager, Cameron Duncan, right? So everyone was urging him, hey, you know what? That's where all the talent is. If you want to fight with Floyd Mayweather, you're going to have to sign with Al Heyman. Plus, there's so many more options for you to fight. And Tim Bradley looked at the situation. He looked how Bob Arum, Bruce Trampler, Cameron Duncan had navigated his career up to that point, and he said, you know what? As long as Manny Pacquiao is still under the Top Rank banner, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay right here. And he ended up getting 3 fights with Manny Pacquiao. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Terrence Crawford doesn't have that luxury of Manny Pacquiao fighting under the Top Rank promotional banner, but he is making just as much as Tim Bradley made per fight, which was roughly around $5 million. Lee, how many other welterweights under Al Heyman's roster list, on Al Heyman's client roster, how many welterweights are making as much as Terrence Crawford currently? I can think of 2, Errol Spence Jr. and Manny Pacquiao. That's it. Okay, so greener pastures, not so sure about that. I think you're absolutely right. Now, think about this also. If he signed an advisory contract with Al Heyman, boy, that's a lot of hands in his pockets. Then he still has to, once again, he's still under contract with Top Rank. That means you're going to have Bob Arum dipping into his pocket, Cameron Duncan, Brian McIntyre, his trainer and manager, and then now you've got Al Heyman. Yeah, I don't think I don't think Warren Buffett would advise that that's a good idea.
No.
So, in my opinion, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is just a rumor. I think TC stays put, and you're absolutely right. If the fans demand it, once again, Manny Pacquiao was still signed with Top Rank Inc. and Bob Arum when he hit the jackpot with the big Mayweather fight.
Right. I mean, and I think that we also talked about too that same old round robin thing. He's going to join Porter and Garcia and Thurman in that round robin where they're all sort of fighting each other. Porter versus Garcia. Garcia versus Thurman, Porter versus Thurman. I mean, if should he sign with Al Heyman, I think you have that scenario where he becomes another one of those fighters in that round robin. The only caveat, Joseph, is there is still Manny. It's still there. Is he more likely to get that fight with Pacquiao now? Maybe because that may not be a fight the public demands, but is Al Heyman saying, hey, you know what? you can get Manny. You know, and that's obviously a big fight. That's a passing of the torch fight potentially. So that might be the only thing where he may be holding Manny over him instead of Errol Spence. Who knows? Or both of them.
Well, I guarantee that's the discussion, saying, hey, you know what, once again, and this is how Al Heyman operates, you know what, I can't guarantee that you're going to get both those fights, but I can guarantee you that you absolutely won't unless you sign with us. You know what, that's right out of the Don King playbook, brother.
Right. But that's untrue as it relates to Errol Spence. That's just not true. As it relates to Manny Pacquiao, it might be because that's not a fight that people are. It's a good matchup, but the people are, the big fight in that division is Spence versus Crawford. So I think in one case it could be true, one case it's not true.
Well, I think, like you said, and you see, this is the thing that frustrates me the most. All of these fighters on the PBC roster, they're all free agents. This shouldn't be even a discussion. There's nothing stopping Errol Spence from competing on ESPN pay-per-view against Terrence Crawford. He has no contractual obligation to any promotional outfit, nor does he have any contractual obligation to any network. He's free to fight wherever he wants. He's the boss. He even stated that a few weeks ago. So, yeah, this is really frustrating for me as a boxing fan, as well as someone who is primarily interested in the positive health of the sport. So, yeah, really tired of being seeing an obstructionist stand in the way of great interpromotional fights being made.
Exactly.
Sick to death of seeing this tired 147-pound round robin. What are we going to see next? Sean Porter versus Errol Spence Jr. in a rematch after the Danny Garcia fight? No, thank you.
That's it.
No, thank you. Sick to death of seeing it. Jeez, my goodness. You know what?
But on the bright side, you got Virgil Ortiz coming up.
That is true. That is true, and that's a fight that's a fight that can be made if Golden Boy Promotions doesn't, patch up the tumultuous relationship currently with DAZN. That could easily be a fight that De La Hoya makes with Bob Arum. Or we could see Jaron Ennis possibly fight for Crawford's title, because even though he's fought on Showtime several times, he's not with Al Heyman and PBC. He's under a different promotional contract. So we could very well see that on ESPN as well. But, guys, we're going to go ahead and move on. Racism still exists in boxing. My word. Speaking of Floyd Mayweather, brother, guys, it was just announced. Deontay Wilder has parted ways with longtime co-trainer Mark Breland. It was just announced today from advisor Shelley Finkel. Right? Now it was reported, once again, it was from that same podcast with Shannon Sharp. Well, when asked about Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury 3, Mayweather had this to say. Hey, Tyson Fury's solid. He's got skills. Deontay Wilder's got bars, but, we can make his skills a lot better. I'm here to help all fighters, not just ones in my stable. I'm even here to help Wilder if he asks for it. I'm here. All he's got to do is let me know that he wants to do and what he wants to do, and we can make it happen, end quote. Now, with the exit of Mark Breland, do you think that there have been discussions between Mayweather and Deontay Wilder? And after the Gervonta Davis fight on the 31st, do you think we'll see Floyd Mayweather join their camp in South Florida, or do you think maybe they're going to move it to the Mayweather compound in Vegas? Your thoughts on this, Lee?
Yeah, I have no idea. Probably, maybe they will move it. Certainly they'll be in discussion if they haven't already been. And Breland's release isn't too it isn't too surprising, given the fact that he did stop the fight. And I honestly believe that Wilder thinks that Breland did him no favors by stopping that fight against Fury, the rematch. So it's not surprising that Breland's gone. Not sure how much that has to do with Floyd, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because Floyd could bring a lot of attention to the fight. He could, basically his presence and him promoting this fight makes it much bigger. Both fighters stand to earn a lot more if Floyd's involved.
That is an interesting point, Lee, because Mayweather understands that that's what he brings to the table. There's going to be a lot more interest in a third fight if Floyd Mayweather does announce that he's definitely going to be in the corner. Now, he might not be the chief second, but if he's a co-trainer and he's in the corner and makes the ring walk with Deontay Wilder, this fight financially immediately becomes a lot bigger. And there's a lot more mainstream and casual, even global interest in this then. This would be huge. So Floyd Mayweather is going to be asking not the customary 10% that most trainers demand. You think he's going to be asking more like 20 or 25% of Deontay's purse? Because once again, for this fight, he's being guaranteed between $20 and $25 million. Mm-hmm. Think about how much that would be for Floyd, and do you think he's actually worth that much?
Well, if he brings if he brings a large masses to the fight, if he gets people to brings attention, greatly increases the pay-per-view buys, really gets people pumped, then certainly, and not to mention that. This is an all-time great. I'm sure he could probably give him some tips. At this point, I don't know how much you want to tell Wilder because, like there's an old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But if I were Wilder and I was assuming a new trainer, even if it were Floyd, I'd want to fight a guy like Steve Rolls first, to kind of shake out the kinks. It's not good to have a new trainer and then go right into a big fight. I'm thinking about Razor Ruddock versus Lennox Lewis.
Well, it worked
Razor
for Tyson Fury.
What was that? Well,
it worked for Tyson Fury in the second fight.
I guess it did. It did. But a lot of times, a guy will come in like Razor Ruddock against Lennox Lewis. You see a little bit of the old Razor Ruddock, and you see a bit. You see some of the new wrinkles, and it's just a mess.
Indeed. Yeah, Tyson Fury is not like other heavyweights. He's so much more versatile.
Exactly. With his versatility and his ability to adapt. So, but Floyd can bring a lot to the table inside and outside the ring. Now, as far as cost, he's going to want something. He's going to want, maybe it's not, it may be monetary, it might be something else. Maybe he wants a piece of Wilder. Maybe he says, hey, I'll train you, but, I want a piece of you, or more than likely, though, he's going to want a pretty penny. And Wilder is kind of stingy from what it seems, so who knows how that's going to work out.
Well, I tell you what, if he wants people to, put it this way, if they're unsure of the interest, the overall interest in this third fight, because right now, there's not a huge demand for the trilogy fight. And a lot of people, because a lot of time has elapsed, and I hate to say this, but the pandemic was actually a good thing for Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, and Fox as well as ESPN, everyone involved, because so much time has elapsed that, you could say there is a lot more interest right now than there was going into the original targeted date, which was in July, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now with the addition of Floyd Mayweather, I think it would be a huge story, and everyone would be on board. If I'm Deontay Wilder and Al Heyman, I'm willing to give Floyd that 20% that he'd probably be looking for. Even if he's just an advisor. and is just there in the corner, and JD's does all the work. Yeah, I'd be willing to do that because that, in my opinion, yeah, you would see this jump up to over 1 million pay-per-view purchases just with Floyd being there in the corner. That's just my opinion.
And maybe putting him in some of the ads, maybe some of the commercials, putting him in some of the ads. I think that you definitely want to use him in that way as well. So yeah, market. It'd be like you'd be marketing 3 guys. Fury, Wilder, and Mayweather. And having his face there, even on the fight poster, with his image in the back behind Wilder or something. I mean, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, for a lot.
Let me ask you this, though, Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this, though, Lee. Because Deontay Wilder, well, he's not exactly a long shot because of his athleticism and his power. Well, he's not a 10-1 betting underdog, but he's going to be about a 3 or 4-1 betting underdog when the closer it gets to the fight. Do you think Floyd is going to want to attach his brand to someone who's a 3 or 4-1 underdog and who's coming off a knockout loss?
Right, he's already willing to do that. He's already willing to do that, and I think Floyd has faith in him. Floyd thinks he can really win, and look at he's attached his brand to Broner, sort of.
That is true.
Sort of. So
once he got smoked like a cheap cigar by Madonna, he was like, "Oh, hey, Broner, who? Adrian, who? Who's AB?
Little brother? Who? What? No,
I don't know that guy." So, it remains to be seen. But guys, we'll see what happens. But it looks like it's going to be off the December 19th date. We don't know if it's going to be pushed back or pushed ahead, but it conflicts with the college football schedule. So, guys, we'll keep everyone informed. Last story of the evening, Lee, and it almost pains me to have to discuss this, but there's so much ignorance being spewed onto the forums that, we feel compelled to. So I'm going to ask you, turns out that some fans, quite a lot of fans actually, believe and are posing the question, will Mikey Garcia be an easier fight for Manny Pacquiao than Conor McGregor?
That question's blasphemous, man. Yeah. That's a...
Oh,
Can
boy.
I, after 6 months of piano training, play better than Liberace? That's the answer.
Oh, geez.
That's just pure ignorance. People don't. That's from people who really don't understand boxing. You've obviously never boxed. Obviously, don't have a. Boxing requires so much. It takes years of training just to be a pro. Just to be a decent pro. McGregor, he definitely has some physical assets. No, he's athletic, no doubt about that. But this guy's not a boxer. Again, it's sort of like me taking 6 months or 8 months of piano lessons and say, okay, I'm the next Liberace. Really? There's no way that you or me, after 6 or 8 months or a year of piano lessons, is going to be better than an elite world-class pianist. That's ridiculous. And I think and that analogy fits. So these people have no idea what they're talking about. And I mean, did you see McGregor's form in the Mayweather fight? I mean, Mayweather didn't even train for that fight. He stood there. No. He was stationary. This is not a guy like all that slapping. This is not a guy that this guy would be beaten by a good amateur, like a really top, especially an Olympic amateur would just smoke, not even an Olympic amateur. A solid amateur boxer would smoke McGregor.
What do you think Edgar Berlanga, what do you think prospect Edgar Berlanga would do to Conor McGregor at 160 pounds?
That'd be another one round. That'd be his easiest fight. And the guys had nothing but 1 round knockouts. Yeah, that'd go about 30 seconds. Have him. Yep. I would love to see that. I would love to. Hey, you know what? You want to box this young upstart, young hungry upstart. Was he 16-0 with 16 knockouts?
Yep. Well, he's 14-0 with 14 knockouts, yeah.
And all of them in the first round, right?
All of them in the first round. That's right.
Yeah. McGregor wouldn't last out of he wouldn't make it to the second round.
Well, let's hear once again from the same interview with Shannon Sharpe. Let's consult once again Floyd Money Mayweather. Let's hear what he had to say about the idea of potentially fighting Conor McGregor and giving him a rematch in 2021. This is what he had to say. Quote, yeah, I'd fight Conor McGregor again, because it's just entertainment. It's an easy fight. Same thing would happen again because he can't punch. Conor McGregor can't punch. Y'all saw what happened. And hey, that's a $300 million fight. I'll take that all day long. Money made all day. And same thing would happen because I'm sorry, Conor McGregor can't punch. Man, it's a more difficult fight to go back into boxing and face some of these young lions. Those guys punch a lot harder than Conor McGregor. McGregor just doesn't know how to punch. That's why I was able to take anything he had and just march forward, and I even smiled at him. End quote. So that's what Mayweather had to say about Conor McGregor, that he can't punch. And guys, have you seen his recent training video? They show him in a boxing ring and punching a heavy bag. And yeah, Floyd's absolutely right. Lee Cleveland, you could come out of retirement.
Yes.
And whoop Conor McGregor's ass.
Sign me up, man.
In the rules of boxing.
Sign me up, man. He would never take that fight, man. They would never, because, it'd be embarrassing. Conor McGregor is, again, this guy, a good amateur beats this guy, period. Now, Joseph, that being said, hey, if Conor McGregor just dropped everything, right, dropped all the MMA stuff, dedicated himself, got with Top Rank, and said, hey, I want to box. I know it's going to take some years, and he just became a boxer. He started from ground zero, okay, and they brought him up. Yeah, 5 or 6 years from now, he could possibly be a contender, no doubt. I mean, I don't know how old is he? What, 30? I mean, maybe it might be too late for that. But yeah, if you guide this guy the right way, have him move up the chain. Just bring him up, kind of like the way they did Cotto, but not as fiercely competitive early on, but maybe like a lower level version of that. You bring him up fight by fight by fight, year after year. Yeah, in 4 years, he could be a top contender. But he'd have to box. Just focus on boxing, and he would need that experience, Joseph. He would need the rounds of sparring. He would need those rounds of actual fighting under his belt, right? So build him up to the point where he's got, after 4 years, he's like 22-0, and you've guided him and you've increased his competition over the years. Okay, in that case, maybe, yeah, sure, he could be a top guy, perhaps, but the 6 months no. This part-time nonsense, no.
Yeah, you're right on the money. And it was, once again, he tweeted that he was fighting Manny Pacquiao next in the Middle East a week ago today, right? But since that time, Mikey Garcia's come out of, wherever he's living, and he stated on FightHype.com that, he said, quote, Conor may fight Manny Pacquiao. That fight more than likely will happen eventually. But Conor has to stand in line because 100% Manny Pacquiao is fighting me next. It's 100%. I'm fighting. But then again, his manager, his brother, Robert Garcia, says he knows nothing about this. So we'll see. But I will say this. Just discovering that Dana White has offered Conor McGregor a non-title lightweight bout versus Dustin Poirier. a rematch, tells us that more than likely Conor McGregor has some obligations contractually that he has to iron out first with the UFC before he takes on Manny Pacquiao. So, more than likely, it looks like Mikey Garcia is going to be next in line for Manny Pacquiao. In my opinion, this is a very difficult fight for Manny Pacquiao. Stylistically, this could be another Juan Manuel Marquez, but a more economical version of JMM. I honestly, I don't like this fight for Manny, especially after the long layoff.
The long layoff at that age, you don't want to.
He's going to be 42 before he gets back in the ring, brother.
Yeah, man, and he hasn't fought since like June of 2019, June or July of 2019. So those two things combined. No, man, like I do not, and he's trying to position himself politically because the current president, I think, is stepping down in a year or two. Mm-hmm. So all of this is no. I don't like this fight for Manny. He should either fight McGregor or retire. Really, he is the WBA super champion, so he is one of the top 3 champions with Crawford and Spence. So championship-wise, he's on that level. He's one of the 3 champions in that division. But I wouldn't mess with Mikey Garcia right now.
Yep. I think you're right on the money, brother. Unfortunately, it looks like that fight more than likely will happen just because for a lack of options. Unless he just completely waits until 2021, we'll see what happens with Errol Spence. That could be a fight. But honestly, I don't like either one of those fights. Right. I don't like Errol Spence Jr., I don't like Terrence Crawford, and I don't like Mikey Garcia for Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah, if you're Manny now and you're 42, you want that McGregor fight. Because that's probably the highest money fight and the least, with the least opposition.
That's right. I'll tell you what, before we actually let everyone go, I need to get your opinion on a couple of matchups. Honestly, I'm not too thrilled about these. I mean, they're going to be good fights, but these just don't do anything for me. We're talking about Devin Haney versus Yuriorkis Gamboa. It was just signed and announced for November 7th on DAZN, as well as Danny Jacobs versus Gabe Rosado for November 27th. What I can't believe is Gabe Rosado is still competing in the ring. Well, that guy's got a lot of miles on the odometer, brother.
He does. He does.
Which fight do you think is the most competitive of the two, and which one are you most looking forward to seeing?
Oh, the answer to both is easily Devin Haney versus Gamboa. I thought Gamboa, for a guy that was really injured, did well last December against Gervonta Davis. If he's healthy, I saw some shades of the old Gamboa. If he's healthy and doesn't get injured, I think that we can see something special here, Joseph. I'm not saying he wins, but I'm saying that this is a Cuban gold medalist, right? That's the elite of the elite, a Cuban gold medal winner. He's a little long in the tooth, but he's still hungry. He's hungry because of all those years of messing around with promoters, being on the shelf. He's hungry, and he probably feels that he's been robbed of a great career. He wants to get as much as he can, in these last days. I really think that we're going to see a very good, very strong, very motivated Yuriorkis Gamboa. And, again, I think we saw some semblance of that against Davis. Had he not gotten injured early on, who knows? But he looked pretty badly injured. And for him to hang on like he did and land the shots that he did, I mean, it's a credit to Gamboa.
Indeed. Yeah, the old man still has heart, and, boy, he still loves to fight. And so, I'm looking forward to that one the most out of both fights, right? Let me ask you something. Last thing we're going to leave everyone with. Now, once again, guys, tickets go on sale for the Alamodome show for Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz, moved to Halloween night. Let me ask you this, though, Cleveland. Was this a smart move? Because when you look at the boxing calendar, boy, that show is going to be competing with quite a bit. At the same time on ESPN from the bubble at the MGM, you're going to see Inoue, the return of Inoue versus Jason Maloney.
Nice.
For Inoue's IBF and WBA bantamweight titles.
Yep.
And on the same day across the pond, you're going to see Alexander Usyk versus Derek Chisora on Sky Sports pay-per-view and distributed on DAZN earlier that day. Do you think that is going to hinder the potential, by the earning potential of the big pay-per-view event on Showtime Sports?
I don't think so. I think that most boxing fans will be like, this is a big day for boxing. They're going to be ready. They're going to be psyched. I'm going to be psyched. And, we'll catch these other fights earlier. The one obstacle could be it's Halloween, and maybe parents are taking their kids out trick-or-treating early on. Who knows how late they might want to stay out, especially if they're on the West Coast. Are they even going to have trick-or-treating this year because of the virus? Who knows? But that might be an obstacle. But, no, I don't think so. I think this is a great day of boxing because I'm just going to watch these other fights early, especially the Usyk fight. I'm going to be psyched for that. We're going to roll right into the next card, so in San Diego or San Antonio. So.
The Keith Thurman joke. That's funny.
I know. I thought about that. I almost made the same mistake he made. Right. But I did catch myself. He didn't. But that's a big card, and I think that's going to. I think sometimes these cards, they feed off of each other, Joseph, because now you have a big day in boxing. It's not just one card. It's like, man, it's like a doubleheader. Boom, boom. With Usyk and Chisora, and then Gervonta Davis, and Santa Cruz. Like that's huge, man.
Yeah, I love it. That's going to be a great full day of boxing, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, Cleveland. Last thing before we let everyone go, and I think I've already said that about 3 times now, but it's just these things just keep coming up. Can Derek Chisora be Alexander Usyk's Orlando Salido on October 31st?
Yeah. That's a great analogy. I don't think so, but I wouldn't be totally surprised. We've seen up and down. It depends on what Chisora shows up, because we thought he was done back in 2014. He had
after the David Haye fight
against Fury, and then he lost a few fights against nobodies, and then he just came back on this winning streak, and then he's performed well. He's performed well, and for the last several years. So he's hot right now. If the right Chisora comes out, who knows what could happen? But I expect Usyk to start fast, take a big lead, and Chisora, if he's going to get him, it's got to be in the trenches, and it's probably going to be late if he has a chance. I'm picking Usyk by a wide decision.
I think you're absolutely right, and Usyk has deceptive power, and he can overwhelm you. He can really break you mentally. Even though Derek Chisora is a very physically and mentally durable guy, he's been stopped before. I think Usyk breaks him and stops him late, just like he did against Michael Hunter. I can see that happening.
Didn't that fight go the distance? That fight went the distance, right?
I thought he stopped him late, or did? Oh, you know what? I think you might be right. He just, I don't know. It was on the either it was stopped late, or he barely hung on to see the final bell. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Oh, wasn't that one of HBO's last shows?
I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, I tell you what, I miss me some HBO, Lee.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too.
on that note, brother, I tell you what, we've got a lot of great boxing stuff up ahead. And, guys, don't forget to tune into ESPN tomorrow night. We've got a great one. I mean, this is an even money fight that could be a potential Fight of the Year candidate. Former IBF title holder Ivan Baranchyk, the beast from Belarus, against Jose Cepeda. This matchup is going to be like peanut butter and jelly. Both these guys move forward, and both these guys throw a lot of punches. Both guys have good chins. Buckle up. This is going to be a great fight. Thank you, Top Rank, for putting this one together. I love this fight. So, Lee, I tell you what, we won't make a prediction on it because it's basically an even money fight. Flip a coin, guys, and get your popcorn ready. It's going to be a great fight. But, guys, that's going to just about do it. Happy Friday night to everyone. Lee, do you have any parting shots for our listening audience?
Hey, check out Box.Buzz for all the latest in boxing. That's Box.Buzz. Box.Buzz. That's
great. You know, guys, he is Lee Cleveland. You can check out all his work on the FightSaga.com, Box.Buzz, B-U-Z-Z. That's just going to about do it. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. On behalf of Mr. Lee Cleveland, I'm Joseph Herron. You've been listening to Fight Saga Radio. Have a great Friday evening, everybody.